Nintendo, the oldest video game company still in operation, if only by technicality. Over the years, they've had some epic highs and pathetic lows, some really good games and some dear god why did you make this games, and of course some amazing consoles and some Wii U's. Of course, as we as human beings for some reason segment our experiences of life into trips our planet makes around the sun, and most countries in the Western Hemisphere seem to set the cutoff point 6 days after not actually the birth of some religion's messiah. Can you tell I can't think of a good video intro to save my life? 2021, aka the Avengers Endgame to 2020's Infinity War. Basically just more of the same, but with a bit of a time skip, everyone having gotten used to how horrible everything is, and for some reason Chris Pratt came back in the second half. This year was at least set to be interesting in terms of video games, since in November last year, Microsoft and Sony released their next generation consoles, the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series line. Yes, that's what I'm going to call these things. It was the year that Sony and Microsoft needed to prove that their new devices were actually worth a damn, and what did we get? Games you could play on other platforms, maybe one or two exclusives to show off each's power, and Black Desert Online for some reason. Okay, let's just go back to the Nintendo. Nintendo had a kinda rocky 2020, partially because of you-know-what, but also because the Switch had started to feel like old news. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's still a great system, but the novelty of it has definitely worn off. Oh, it's a home console I can play on the go. Amazing, you can play it on the toilet and the bed. Yeah, the system definitely needed a boost. Just a heads up, I'm mainly going to be ordering this discussion by Nintendo's announcements in 2021. Sure, there were a lot of games outside of what was announced in Nintendo Directs, but I feel like I'm not going to get yelled at if I neglect mentioning Cave Bad in favor of Bowser's Fury. January and February definitely weren't devoid of releases, of course, but it felt like they definitely only had one or two big titles worth getting excited for. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World got an official re-release to the excitement of nerds around the world, plus a cloud version of Hitman 3 for the Switch. Cloud versions of games are dumb and everyone knows it, but at least now I can commit an assassination with lag. February at least got one big showstopper to its name prior to any directs, in the form of Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury. Now this is a good package. It's a remake of the game for Wii U, but now on a console more than 5 people own. I never really played too much of 3D World on Wii U despite owning both, partially because I was just sorta not playing the Wii U all that much. I was more interested in the 3DS, honestly, plus 3D Land had never grabbed me all that much either. Playing it now, it's definitely a good game. I'm sure some of the tweaks made for the Switch port helped me enjoy it more. I would have quit after the first level if they kept the multiplication symbol. I can definitely understand why it didn't initially grab people compared to Mario Odyssey, since it is very much built in the same style as the 2D Mario games, very segmented and level-based, but speaking as someone who's played at least a little of every new Super Mario Bros. Game, that's right, I'm part of the problem, this is definitely one of the better iterations on the formula, at least in recent memory. Bowser's Fury isn't better than Mario Odyssey, and the clickbait videos that say it is are dumb. Okay, that's a bit harsh. Bowser's Fury is definitely an amazing experience. It's basically framed as its own separate game packaged in with a 3D World port, and I can definitely see why. It takes a lot from 3D World, of course. Pretty much all the power-ups and abilities from 3D World make at least some appearance, but it's very much distinct as its own game. Exploring the open worlds of Lake Lapcat, dealing with Fury Bowser, hell, even just the inclusion of Bowser Jr. in a new collectible and Cat Shines, it's a very different feel from 3D World, and it's a blast to play through. However, I'm not about to start saying it's the best Mario game ever, or whatever Nathaniel Bandy is saying. It is much more open than 3D World, but it's still very segmented. Basically every island is a linear obstacle course to get through, and since they're all on the same map, they end up being a lot shorter than most 3D World levels. Plus, while some of them are really distinct, a lot of them kind of blend together in my memory. Like, who can actually tell the difference between Scamper Shores and Pounce Mountain Isle at a glance? Okay, very interesting crowd, but you know what I mean. Like I said, it's a fun time, and I really do think it's a good game, but it definitely feels a bit too limited to call it the best 3D Mario ever, you know? However, less than a week after 3D World plus Bowser's Fury released, we had a Nintendo Direct, and everyone was hyped. 2020 was really sparse in terms of full general directs. We mostly got a few specialized directs about specific games, a handful of partner directs with no first-party titles, and do the 3 Smash announcements count as directs? Point is, people were excited for the true directs to return, and did it disappoint? Maybe. Hard to say, really. We kicked out with the announcement of Pyra and Mythra in Smash Bros. Ultimate. Alright, I barely care about this. Xenoblades never really grabbed my attention very much. I know they're good games, I just don't care all that much for most JRPGs. The characters deserve to be included. I mean, Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is apparently a really good entry in the series, and it's interesting to see a return to swap characters since all we really had at this point was Pokemon Trainer and Pokemon Trainer. I just kinda didn't care all that much personally, and I'm a Swordbane, so you know that's saying something. Maybe not something worthwhile, but After that, we got a few headlines. Fall Guys coming to Switch, not too surprising since the system is tailor-made for these kinds of games. Outer Wilds on Switch is a sorely overlooked game from 2019, amazing music and a brilliant gameplay loop, definitely good to see it on Switch. Famicom Detective Club finally released outside of Japan, that's cool. I haven't played these games, visual novels aren't generally my sort of thing, but it's always cool to see a previously Japan exclusive series make its way overseas. It gives me hope that someday I can not play Mother 3 past the first big story event officially. Another Warriors game, this time Samurai Warriors 5. I couldn't even really get into the Warriors formula for Zelda, so not that exciting for me. Hope it was for the Warriors fans. Legend of Mana makes sense considering Trials of Mana came out in 2020, that definitely fits for a Switch port. Monster Hunter Rise definitely seems to be a Monster Hunter game, and that's about all I can say about that. After getting out of the first headline section, we saw a spotlight on Mario Golf. Okay, I've never been a big fan of Mario sports games, honestly. I've heard mixed things from this game. Some people seem to think it was okay, but considering I can't remember its subtitle, safe to say I wasn't too interested in the highlight. But hey, at least we can play as Miis. Next, we get a rapid-fire highlight reel, the not Telltale anymore Borderlands game, Capcom Arcade Stadium, which was definitely an arcade collection, Stubbs the Zombie, I know of at least one tuber who was probably ad for that, and that was it for the rapid-fire reel. Don't worry, we'll get to the truly ridiculous reel further into this. Next, a headline for No More Heroes 3, which was the first time the direct announcer ever showed off voice acting chops, followed by Neon White, which for a moment I thought was just more No More Heroes. Yeah, I still have no clue what this game is, and as of me writing this paragraph, this game isn't even out yet, and I've heard next to nothing about it outside of this direct. Good use of time, Nintendo. Then DC Superhero Girls Team Power, I think even saying the full title is 2 more words than the game really deserves, so of course this segment was longer than the Stubbs the Zombie appearance. Plants vs. Zombies, the third-person shooter spin-off. Can you tell we were in the lull for a bit here? Then, holy shit, Miitopia is getting re-released on Nintendo Switch. Oh my god! They just sort of plopped this into the rec, right between PvZ's spin-off and a Mario update for Animal Crossing, but this was one of the most hype announcements in the direct, at least for those who knew what it was. Miitopia released for the 3DS in mid-2017 outside of Japan, well after the Switch became the big thing in gaming, but it was an incredibly solid title. I played through the game all the way on Switch and holy shit, it's definitely worth it. It's a full RPG, believe it or not. You can't control your party members' actions, so there is some RNG to try and make it through, but it's still super solid. The big additions with the Switch version weren't necessarily gameplay oriented. I mean, you could have a horse, which sort of affected your abilities in battle, but I think that was only interesting because they could give your player character a super ability and occasionally make your other party members slightly less weak. No, the big unique selling point for this remake was the makeup system. Essentially included in this game is a full suite of customization and art tools to apply to every Mii character's face. There are basically no restrictions with this thing. Sure, you can only place 100 elements total, but within that limit, you can make some genuinely insane stuff. I didn't use it that much personally, mainly because the most I've ever been able to make in Photoshop is semi-tolerable pixel art, but some people go crazy with it. So yeah, Miitopia, 10 out of 10 game, definitely recommend. After this, we got a look at the next Animal Crossing update, this one adding in Mario-themed items, mostly just cosmetic stuff, although I really like the pipes since they actually function like pipes. Then we got a deep dive into Project Triangle Strategy, the next game from the Octopath Traveler team, and whoo boy could I not care less for this game. Look, the HD pixel art look is fine, but from what I can tell, the games are passable at best. I've never been a big strategy head, and considering my brother, who is a big strategy game fan, said the demo was terrible, I don't think this game is going to be interesting. Also, Triangle Strategy isn't a good title. Octopath Traveler was kind of dumb as a title, but at least it left some stuff to the imagination, and it flowed kinda nice off the tongue. Triangle Strategy is the most boring, matter-of-fact name you could give a game like this. You could call Fire Emblem that, and it'd still work as well as it does here. After that slice of boring took up more time than I dedicated to Miitopia, they showed off a CG teaser for a new Star Wars game, which still isn't out and I still don't care about. EA showed off a Super Dodgeball game in just the most confusing manner possible. Like, is this knockoff Warcraft character even alluded to in the actual game, or was this just a weird marketing gimmick? World End Club was next. A version of this game was available on Apple Arcade before, but this is apparently the full definitive release of it. It looks fine, definitely made me think it was Danganronpa or Zero Escape Pokemon Edition for a second, but it looks alright. Hades got a physical release, definitely a cool announcement and totally deserved, but kinda weird that it was announced as a Nintendo thing. I guess Hades is indie enough to qualify as a Nintendo supporting indie games thing, I don't know. A Ninja Gaiden collection of the HD trilogy, that's probably excited for Ninja Gaiden trilogy fans. Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity announced it was getting DLC, which I think everyone saw coming. Like I said, never really got into Hyrule Warriors, so expect the same verbal shrug when this DLC comes up again in the next 2 directs. We got another rapid fire scissor reel, Bravely Default 2, which made me question, wait, wasn't there a Bravely 2nd on 3DS? Ghost and Goblins Resurrection asks, what of Ghost and Goblins? But again, Saga Frontier Remastered for everyone who understands why Saga is capitalized like that. Apex Legends is a game, and that's all I can really say on the subject, and that was it for the headlines and scissor reels. Fun! Next we had AG Aonuma come up and say, hey, no new Breath of the Wild 2 info, but here's Skyward Sword on Switch. It's definitely a divisive announcement. Skyward Sword with hindsight wasn't a terrible game, but it wasn't exactly a game a lot of fans were clamoring for a standalone remake of. I own the game physically because I am now and always have been a Zelda simp, but I've yet to actually play it a significant amount. It's good that it's getting a second chance with some quality of life improvements since it is a pretty important game in the Zelda storyline, but I don't know. I think it would have been cooler to get a re-release of Wind Waker and Twilight Princess HD on Switch and maybe have Skyward Sword as well, or even all 3 in one compilation. Ultimately though, it's nice to have a version of this game without forced motion controls. I'll definitely play through Skyward Sword HD someday, since now I don't have to worry about my Wiimote's rechargeable battery pack disrupting Wii Motion Plus. I've lived a very interesting life. Finally, in the last 4 minutes, we got the reveal of Splatoon 3. This was definitely a good game to end on, maybe a bit niche since not all Nintendo fans love Splatoon, but the announcement of the sequel was definitely one of the more hype moments of the Direct. I might talk about this more in the future, but the game looks really cool, and it's part of the reason I got Splatoon 2 not long after this Direct, so I guess advertising works after all. So, that was the February 2021 Direct. Overall, a pretty solid return to the Direct format. Definitely a fair share of duds in there. I don't think anyone needed a deep dive on Final Fantasy Tactics, but worse. But some very solid announcements as well. In total, a pretty average Direct, but after the drought that was 2020, definitely a welcome one. Outside of that Direct, we did get some solid titles in spring this year. Crash 4 made it over to Switch in March. I didn't get it at the time, and I'm sure as hell not going to buy an Activision game now, but cool to have the option to not buy it on the Switch. Balan Wonderworld, aka a poorly optimized game even outside of the Switch, and the answer to the question, can the creator of Nights into Dreams make an even more instant failure than a Sega Saturn game? We had the public execution of Mario on March 31st, always fun to attend a funeral. Pac-Man 99 is interesting. Mario 35 already tested out the Tetris 99 formula with other games, but it feels like it fits Pac-Man a lot more than a traditional platformer like Mario. Just not a lot to talk about with it. It's Pac-Man, but an online battle royale. Fun fact, I looked up a list of Nintendo Switch releases by release date for the Switch, and did you know 2021 was when most of the FNAF games came to Switch? I sure didn't, and I really don't care outside of being confused. Really, the biggest titles to release during spring that weren't in the Direct were the Shin Megami Tensei 3 remake, which was in one of the first partner Directs from 2020, and Game Builder Garage, which basically was just, what if we made a game creator for Switch because it worked so well for Stadia? It wasn't a bad season, and there were some interesting ports and indie games, but nothing jaw-dropping. Then E3 rolled around, aka the game industry saying, hey, we're sorry we didn't announce anything last year, would a Gearbox press conference make up for it? E3 2021 was generally agreed to be pretty disappointing. Not always god-awful, Microsoft's show was at least decent, but Ubisoft spent half their time on Tom Clancy games, Square Enix spent half an hour on another Mario game, and half the shows just felt like companies said, well, we can't just bring our games to a physical convention, let's have a press conference and talk about all the 2 games we're going to show off. A lot of people were hoping and praying for Nintendo to save E3, so did they? Well, we started things off with probably the worst way to announce a Zelda game was cancelled. Kazuya for Smash, a decent pick if not a terribly exciting one. Like Terry, Ryu, and Ken, it's nice to get more fighting game representatives, especially compared to a 9th Fire Emblem rep, and Tekken getting a fighter in that wasn't Heihachi was a nice surprise, but it felt a little bit underwhelming for the penultimate fighter in the game. I mean, Namco Bandai helped develop Smash Ultimate, so having a fighter from one of their series is definitely a lot less exciting than a Microsoft or Square Enix character. Still, more hype than Pyra and Mithra, so my DLC hype tier list is at least being balanced out. The trailer was cool at least. Into the headline section, we got Life is Strange coming to Switch, fair enough, I like the art style from the start of this trailer at least. The second headline, strangely, was a rapid fire reel, and what was weirder was there were only 4 games. Guardians of the Galaxy, because we just didn't see it enough at Square Enix's show, Worms Rumble, which was kinda interesting, Astria Ascending, definitely looked like a JRPG, and finally, 2 Point Kip as the successor to 2 Point Hospital. I can't wait for the Stipendium song. Then we can start getting into the big dogs. Super Monkey Ball Banana Mania, holy shit. This was a surprising announcement. Technically, Monkey Ball made a comeback with Banana Blitz HD, which wasn't terrible, but it was an odd choice for a remake. The Wii version that made major changes to the gameplay and level design in order to accommodate motion controls. Yeah, perfect choice for a multi-platform remake. Banana Mania takes things back to basics, remaking Super Monkey Ball Deluxe, meaning it also functions as a remake of both Monkey Ball 1 and 2, all in one package. I got this one on PC, so there might be some differences between versions I can't account for, but as a game, yeah, this is classic Monkey Ball, right? Feels pretty good. I've heard some hardcore fans complain about some changes to the physics engine. Personally, I think it works well, but I also haven't played these games in years, so I'm not the best judge. Either way, it's great to get a remake like this, especially when it wasn't expected. Then immediately after that was announced, we got Mario Party Superstars, and already this is the best E3 presentation in 3 years. I've already made a video about this game, but fuck it, I wrote this section before making that review, I'll talk about it anyways. Mario Party Superstars, sort of a remake of the past Mario Party games, sort of a sequel to Super Mario Party, sort of Nerdcubed going, okay, everyone hated Mario Party the top 100, let's try to do it again, but actually good. Now, I never played most of the original Mario Parties. I grew up on the GameCube, and my Mario Parties of choice were 4 and 7. If you're wondering why I didn't grow up with 5 and 6, blame GameStop. So while some of the minigames in this were familiar for me, pretty much everything else was brand new, and wow is it good. I was one of the few people who really enjoyed Super Mario Party in its original and surprisingly final form. Yeah, I understand some of the complaints like the cheap stars or the overgenerous minigames, but personally I loved how much content there was despite how economical the game was. Seriously, just the fact that every board had 2 different modes, one for the main mode and one for the co-op Star Rush mode, it genuinely adds a lot of value to each board. Superstars though is just good old-fashioned Mario Party, as Hudson God intended. The boards are all super fun and pretty much every minigame earns its spot in the game. If I had to nitpick, I'd say it's kind of a step back in terms of modes. Super Mario Party had a single-player minigame challenge, a co-op board mode, a rhythm game mode, a 4-player co-op mode, but Superstars only really has playing through the boards in free-for-all or playing random minigames. Sure, there is a 2v2 challenge for the minigames and a 1v3 mode where you and 2 friends challenge a CPU, but in general it still feels kinda lacking, especially as a single-player experience. The online multiplayer does make up for it somewhat, especially since every mode has it straight out of the box, but considering my router is currently balanced on my bed and I lose power for it whenever a light breeze passes over Arizona, I'm not that impressed by online play. Still, even with that nitpick, this is an amazing Mario Party. Arguably the best since Hudson's Cloth got capped. Granted, it kinda cheated to do that, but hey, as long as it isn't in a relationship, cheating is always good and fun to do. And then they immediately followed that up by talking about Metroid. Yeah, Metroid Dread is a good game. I ain't gonna go into detail, it's a good ass game, go buy it. Okay, fine. Metroid Dread is the first original 2D Metroid game since 2002, and the first original Metroid game on console since 2010. It's sort of a follow-up to Metroid Samus Returns from 2017, which was a late 2017 game on the 3DS, and it takes everything that game in Metroid Fusion did, took the best elements of both, and then made a game that was even better. This is the best feeling Metroid I've ever played. It balances difficulty better than most games I've ever played, while still having some of the toughest puzzles and boss fights ever made, and it manages to make the player feel like an idiot while still giving them all the tools and all the information they need to succeed. It is by all accounts the single greatest game in the Metroid series. It sold in its first week more than the past 4 games did in their whole lifetimes, and more people need to play it. David Jaffe is an idiot, go play Metroid Dread. Next up was a rapid fire sizzle reel. It showed Just Dance 2022, Cruise and Blast, and that's it. Yep, a 2-game highlight reel, which admittedly is all Just Dance really deserves, but still it's kind of laughable they even gave these 2 their own headline without just giving them individual headlines. After the most underdeveloped reel ever, we saw Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, the latest Dragon Ball Z game, coming to Switch, which I'm sure is incredibly exciting for anyone who knows who or what a Kakarot is. Personally, I was more impressed by the announcement of Mario Golf updates, and I reiterate, I do not care about a Mario Golf. Monster Hunter Stories 2 is still coming to Switch, which everyone already knew about, but it's nice to hear it again, I guess. And then we get WarioWare. WarioWare Get It Together, aka the first actual WarioWare on console since the Wii. I'm sure I pissed off all 3 Game & Wario fans there. It's a good game. The character mechanics managed to reinvent the WarioWare formula without completely changing it, and being able to play as the WarioWare characters is super fun. It's a bit short if you're just playing through the story mode, but really, what did you expect from the gourd micro games? WarioWare is all about collection and completion, and it's really good at it. I don't have much more to say other than, it's a really damn good WarioWare game. If you like WarioWare, you'll like Get It Together. Now to stop saying WarioWare so my spell check can stop panicking. After that, we got a deep dive on Shin Megami Tensei 5. Not my cup of tea, but I can appreciate how big a deal this is for the Shin Megami Tensei fans. It looks cool, but again, JRPGs aren't really my thing. I prefer my RPGs to be a bit quirkier and weirder than anime. Back in the headlines, we got Danganronpa Decadence, a collection of the first 3 Danganronpa games and an expansion of the board game spin-off in one of them. Again, nice for Danganronpa fans, but not my thing. Same with Fatal Frame made in Blackwater, though it's always nice seeing Wii U games finally jump off the sinking ship. Then they announced games and DLC coming soon. Doom Eternal got some Ancient Gods, which I imagine our Catholic Doomslayer will be fond of. Tony Hawk 1+2 is always nice to see. Strange Brigade is definitely a game that exists, and as we get out of the reel, Mario plus Rabbids Sparks of Hope proved Ubisoft really had no reason to exist in C3. Next we get Advance Wars Reboot Camp. Again, not fond of strategy games of any kind, but I love the name. Finally, we moved on to the last section of the Direct, based around Zelda. First was the first DLC wave for Age of Calamity, which, what did I say about Verbal Shrug? Next, Aonuma came on to remind us that Skyward Sword HD was coming out, thanks it was easy to forget. Then he showed off the commemoration for Zelda's 35th anniversary, the Zelda Game & Watch. I'm sure the collectors had a panic attack. Then at last, we got our second ever look at the sequel to Breath of the Wild. I'm sure I'll talk about this at length next year when it comes out, but for now, all I can say is this. I'm both very nervous and super hyped. And that was it for Nintendo's E3 2021. It's weird how 3 of the most exciting announcements in it were part of the headline sections, but overall definitely the best E3 of the year, and they definitely knew how to end it. People have been begging for more info on Breath of the Wild sequel since 2019. Reveal that it still existed and it's looking so good was a great way to end an E3 showcase. From there, we had a few interesting releases outside of just those announcements. Pokemon Unite came out in July and has been stealing money from kids ever since. The Great Ace Attorney Chronicles came out worldwide for the first time, though it's also on PS4 and PC, which feels weird. I always think of Ace Attorney as a Nintendo series, even though the HD trilogy is on mobile and PC. I don't know. We also got Sonic Colors Ultimate in early September, and we don't need to talk about that. It's all fine, this didn't happen. During this time, we also got the announcement of the Switch OLED, the upgraded model for the Nintendo Switch, using a new, bigger screen in handheld mode, a LAN port on the dock, and a million people asking, is this supposed to be the Switch Pro? Look, Nintendo doesn't really do conventional upgrades to their main consoles. Hell, even their handhelds are very debatable upgrades. I don't have a Switch OLED for myself, but I am writing this before Christmas, so who knows, maybe one of my relatives will give me a light bulb. Looking at what I've seen of it online, it looks like a decent upgrade, but only really outside of the dock. Still want it though. Then, on September 23rd, we got the third Direct of the year. It was kind of a surprise, only officially announced the day before, and it was labeled as mainly talking about games coming in winter 2021. Yeah, I don't know what the hell they were talking about. Pretty much everything they talked about either came out in fall or isn't coming out until 2022. I think maybe they were just trying to keep expectations down, but considering the first thing they announced was Monster Hunter DLC launching in summer 2022, I don't think anyone bought it for long. After Koizumi came out and demonstrated that I really don't care about Monster Hunter, we got an update on Mario Party Superstars. It was nice to see some of the boards they were including, plus the existence of mount minigames. Then we got a card-based RPG called Voice of Cards, The Idle Dragon Roars, and I imagine I wouldn't be interested even if I knew what this game is. Disco Elysium's Final Cut coming to Switch, definitely cool. I know a lot of people really love this game. The second and maybe final wave of DLC for Age of Calamity, Verbal Shrug, oh holy shit, Final Fantasy Kart. At risk of making the Scott the Woz plagiarism even more obvious,
it looks fine.
Next, we got Koizumi saying, hey, we aren't starting or ending this Direct with a Smash character, we're gonna give Sakurai the honor of announcing this himself, and fuck it, we might as well talk about that video now. We started off talking about the Mii costumes being added, which was interesting. Doomslayer costume was a good addition, but I'm kind of confused by the full line of it for this. 2 Splatoon costumes, both just being head pieces, both I could have sworn were already in the game, and the last DLC fighter isn't even slightly related to Splatoon. What, did they just want to throw a bone to everyone who complained E3 didn't mention Splatoon 3? Finally, we got to the reveal of the final DLC character in Smash Ultimate, and quite possibly the last fighter to ever be added to Smash Bros. Overall. Sora from Kingdom Hearts. I believe I speak for everyone when I say, why wasn't an Imagine Party baby, you cowards? Now, this is an incredible addition. There were obviously a lot of legal hurdles the team had to overcome to make this happen, which is kind of evidenced by the representation in the stage and the spirits. Not a single Disney animated character in sight. Just Kingdom Hearts original characters. I guess that sort of explains why the Mii costumes had nothing to do with Sora. I mean, who are they gonna add, Roxas? I get why it is this way, even if I don't care for it that much, but really, all this just kind of shows how incredible this edition is. Sakurai flat out said that in the Smash ballot for Smash 4, Sora was the most requested fighter, and they actually did want to include him sooner. Like, they even had Iwata included in the discussions about bringing Sora to Smash, but it couldn't happen before this point. Who knows the exact reason? Maybe it was Square Enix, maybe it was all Disney, maybe just the combination of the two. I do fully believe that when the Smash ballot finished, Bayonetta was the top character that could reasonably add it, if Sora was the overall winner. Even if I'm not a big Kingdom Hearts fan, I can appreciate just what this inclusion means for Smash Bros. Itself and for gaming as a whole. Then we got 3D Kirby. For some reason, everyone in the Nintendo... What? 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 What the Wow! Yeah, I'm hyped. After that, we got the announcement of an Animal Crossing Direct in October, discussing an update that released in early November, and again, I might as well talk about this now. I really loved Animal Crossing New Horizons. I played it more or less every day from when it came out to New Year's 2020, but I kind of fell off in January this year. I don't know, I still enjoyed it, but it was getting a bit monotonous, and I wasn't all that interested in what little they were adding with the new holidays. This update, though, was so much. It added Harv's co-op, Captain's boat tours, the gyroids, Brewster, a ton of quality of life improvements and gameplay additions. They even gave us new furniture. Oh fuck, is that a chair? And that's not even mentioning the DLC. Happy Home Paradise might not be for everyone who plays, but I really love it. And even if you don't, it's basically a full game within New Horizons. It was seen as slightly pricey, being $25, but I really do think it's worth it. Nico, best boy in Animal Crossing, fight me. After that direct was teased, we got a sizzle reel labeled 2 games, 1 game update. And how many entries do you think were included? Mario Golf got its second update, alright. The opening for a generic Disney minigames thing made people panic because it included an envelope, Nintendo fans are rabid, and Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic coming to Switch. Oh yeah, I am indifferent to this. Yeah, it was a weird reel to put together, but hey, Mario Golf is probably getting slightly better, KOTOR is really exciting for some people, and Disney served as nice foreshadowing. Next, we saw Dying Light 2 announced its cloud version on Switch, but also the first Dying Light is fully on Switch. I don't get it, developers. Is the Switch too weak to run AAA games or not? Look, I can appreciate that the Switch may not be as powerful as the PS6 or the Xbox X Series X, One X, but if this thing can run Breath of the Wild with only a few frame drops a year, I feel like it can play a generic zombie game from the creators of Call of Juarez. Then, wow, even more triangle strategy. Wow, this name still fucking sucks. More on Metroid Dread, still my game of the year, but I don't understand why they felt the need to highlight more of this game considering it was coming out like 2 weeks later. All they really did was spoil that Kraid apparently didn't die either time Samus shot him in the face. Then, BAM! Nintendo Online Plus Expansion Pass. Nintendo Online Plus Expansion Pass, aka the most contentious thing Nintendo's put out since the last thing they released. Again, I've already made a video on this, and if you're watching this, you've probably seen that one, but here's the short version. A lot of people were upset just by the announcement that N64 games and Genesis games would be locked behind a separate plan rather than added to the base online loadout. Others were thoroughly pissed off when it was announced that the individual plan would be $50 a year and a whopping $80 a year for a family plan. Personally, I feel like the latter is actually kind of reasonable, since you can have 8 people on a family plan, so if you use all of the plan, it's just $10 a person. Still more were frustrated that the next big selling point was the New Horizons DLC, since a lot of people really don't care about Animal Crossing. I imagine there will be more first-party DLC for free with the plan later, but as a selling point, it is kind of niche. Finally, people got pissed off when the pack was finally released, and the N64 games ran like gas. Yeah, that one I'll give you. I really do think Nintendo can fix a lot of problems with more games and DLC for the service, and for the love of God fixing their N64 emulator. But for now, yeah, I kinda wasted $80. But hey, at least my mom can redesign houses. Next, we got yet another 2-title sizzle reel, always a fun inclusion. Shadowrun Trilogy, alright, I think I've heard the title Shadowrun before, so cool. Then the Castlevania Advance Collection, now this is cool. A batch of the Game Boy Advance Castlevania titles all in one package with better emulation features than Switch Online? I'm not even a Castlevania fan, and I'll bet 20. Then a remake of ActRacer, the game most likely to get a "oh I forgot this existed" reaction from the Screamers. It looks nice, a unique form of gameplay, just kind of an odd choice for a full remake on Switch. Deltarune Chapter 2, not really a Nintendo thing, but I love Deltarune, I love Chapter 2, and considering my dumb pixel edits of Chapter 2 are currently my 4th highest viewed video of them all, I think it's safe to say most people liked it a lot. Then we got a real rapid sizzle reel. Hot Wheels Unleashed, Surviving the Aftermath, Shin Megami Tensei 5, Wreckfest, Namco's Arcade Archives, Rune Factory 5, Lesbians, now this is a sizzle reel. Next, Shigeru Miyamoto came on to discuss the next Mario movie, and I'll let myself from the past sum up the internet's reaction.
The comedian will be playing Toad. I'm looking forward to great comedic moments. Even though this is a Mario movie, Donkey Kong will also be making an appearance.
This looks like a parody. Finally, we got more info on Splatoon 3, showing a lot of what makes the game so different from Splatoon 2, and we finish on Bayonetta 3. Not a bad ending, but definitely parts of 2 very different niches. Neither of these were really big announcements either. Splatoon 3 I already mentioned, and we knew Bayonetta 3 was in development for years. I will say, the more I see of Splatoon 3, the more interested I am. It looks like they've made a lot of changes to the core gameplay, and the story mode looks really interesting. I'll probably give it a look when it comes out, though again, Bed Router and Arizona wins. That brings us to October, with the release of Super Monkey Ball Banana Mania, Metroid Dread, Mario Party Superstars, as well as the videos for Sora and the Animal Crossing update. November brought the update and DLC properly, as well as 2 big releases I haven't discussed. First, on the 11th, we got GTA Trilogy Definitive Edition. Yeah. Next was Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, which was the better remaster only because it actually functioned. Well, at least after the Day 1 patch. Mostly. Kind of a disappointment for me, if only because I was hoping it would have anything from Platinum, or maybe a single new feature, but no, it's pretty much just Diamond and Pearl with a slightly modified art style. Emphasis on slightly. But hey, at least I got to play my first Nuzlocke and whip the very first gym leader. Fun! And that brings us to December, and fun fact, with the exception of a couple revisions, I wrote everything prior to this paragraph in mid to late November. No major announcements this month, though since I am planning on releasing this on the 25th and working on it much earlier, there are still a few more days for that to change. Some big releases, most notably Danganronpa Decadence, a remaster of one of the Telltale Sim & Max games, and a new Big Bang Academy basically out of nowhere. This was also the month of the Game Awards, and Nintendo was robbed! I mean, sure, Metroid Dread won Best Action Adventure Game, but that's like giving Phoenix Wright a Best Puzzle Game Award and then giving Game of the Year to freaking Fahrenheit. Also, low-key, Psychonauts 2 was even more robbed, but that's off topic. So, in conclusion, how did Nintendo do in 2021? Solid 8 out of 10. Okay, there were definitely some dark spots on the year, most notably the delisting of Mario games and the whole expansion pack situation. However, overall, this has been an incredibly exciting year for the Switch. The big return of the Direct, some of the best games for the platform, the best E3 showing in years, and that's not even touching on what we know is coming out next year. This was an incredible year to be a Nintendo fan. It just had a few blemishes that kept it from being perfect. But you know what? Perfection doesn't exist, unless you're talking about Metroid Dread, in which case the only way to get perfection is to outsource to Madrid.